With most new pieces of juggling or circus equipment, the juggling world is happy to share, for people to copy the initial idea, to learn from it, to build upon it, and eventually create their own work. Any ethical concerns over the exclusive ownership of a concept, a prop, or a performance apparatus by the original creator are outweighed by the collective attitude that the world is a better place when more than one person can explore what is possible when performing with that prop. Nobody now argues that there should only have ever been one person to present an S-staff routine, or only one person may ever perform with a sire wheel, and that these should never be performed in new ways for different audiences and different venues. But what about Michael Moschen's triangle and Greg Kennedy's cone? What makes these pieces of juggling apparatus different from all other juggling props? Why is it, when other jugglers create their own version of these performance apparatus and use them in their shows, they are condemned by many in the juggling community? To see what makes the triangle and the cone different, let's use a Venn diagram to work through the real reasons performers don't perform with an unusual prop or a new apparatus, aside from the obvious problem that it doesn't look good. One is that it's hard to do. Nobody minds that so many jugglers are having a go at 8-ring isolations because we know that the amazing visual effect is based on hundreds or thousands of hours of practice. 2, engineering. The reason why nobody performed with programmable glow clubs for so long wasn't because the juggling was hard, as it can be as easy as the juggler wants it to be. Instead, the amazing visual effect is based on LEDs and microcontrollers, and those are hard to fit into a club in a satisfying and durable way. 3, logistics. If something is big or difficult to transport, it has to be really worth it. Even if there is no advanced engineering involved, an apparatus so hard to transport is difficult to justify from a business perspective. I've learned this lesson myself the hard way many times, which is why I made my latest bounce routine not to need a bounce slab at all. The more advanced the juggling skill, the larger and more perfect the bounce slab has to be. This doesn't require any extra engineering, but good luck fitting it into your suitcase when flying to a gig. You can now buy as many glow clubs as you want instead of making your own, but you still need computer programming skills to make the light show unique. The sire wheel and the juggling cube are two props that used to be in the central intersection. Hard to make, hard to transport, hard to do. But so many people wanted the engineering and logistics problem solved that it's commercially viable for a few different companies to step in, and you can now just buy the solution. There's even a specially designed bag for your sire wheel. Paying money will get you the props. Now they're just hard to do. So what remains in the central intersection? Force bouncing 5 balls while walking downstairs? No commercial interest will ever mass produce such a staircase, as the difficult logistics make the market for such an apparatus very small. Each person who wants to recreate this trick on stage will have to solve the engineering problems afresh each time, and will also have to own a truck to transport it to gigs. Which brings us to the last intersection. The visual appeal of Greg Kennedy's cone and Michael Moschen's triangle is very high, but a high level of skill isn't required to achieve the initial visual effect. The impact comes from the gravity-defying movement of the balls. That same gravity-defying movement actually helps lower the juggling skill needed, and that's down to physics and mathematics. When rolling a ball in a cone, it returns to the same place, maybe just above or below, but never further or closer than the inside surface of the cone. The ball loses height only due to friction, so can roll for a very long time before having to be caught. The same with rolling balls in a bowl. Collisions are the main problem, not gravity. What about the triangle? On a flat surface, it has been proved that every triangular table with the largest angle no greater than 100 degrees has a periodic billiard path. This means that, ignoring gravity for the moment, if you throw a ball inside a bounce triangle, after enough time it will return to where you threw it. Unless you throw it into the tightest part of the corner, you don't have to worry about it getting out of control. These mind-bending patterns with bouncing and rolling require no skills that would stop any competent juggler from copying them. This is made clear by the fact that Tom Wall learned the entire conic routine to perform in Cirque du Soleil's Totem Show in just 2 months. No offence to Tom Wall, but I'm sure he would find it much more difficult to learn the most visually impressive parts of Anthony Gatto's full act in 2 months, or Victor Key's act in 2 months, especially if he hadn't used those props before and was learning the technique from scratch. The way that these two juggling apparatus became so attached to their original creators is a quirk of history. In the case of Greg Kennedy's cone, it turns out that the engineering factor was very difficult, but not a big enough hurdle to stop it being created. Greg Kennedy was an engineer before he became a professional juggler, and his entire late career is based on his engineering approach to new juggling material. Once he had demonstrated the prop and technique with a viral video hit, Cirque du Soleil could swoop in and make it a commercial success with their virtually unlimited budget, technical expertise, artistic vision, and logistical capabilities. Michael Moschen is a certified genius for coming up with the triangle. Certified genius in that he received a fellowship from the MacArthur Foundation, known as the Genius Grant, in 1990. A year later, he created In Motion with Michael Moschen, a PBS TV show episode that helped him on his way to becoming one of the most famous jugglers in America. With the budget of a Genius Grant and with the help of a TV production team, building and transporting the apparatus wasn't a huge hurdle to overcome before it became an established act. For other jugglers, it's a much more tricky proposition. John Blanchard wrote this about performing in Portugal. Due to the obvious logistical problems with transporting such a large instrument, I ended up making the structure on site. I was up until 5 a.m. the night before putting it together. Even for Michael Moschen, it's logistically too difficult for many shows. For his TED Talk, he decided against bringing the triangle itself, and instead settled for showing a video.
Okay, can we show the video of the triangle? Are we ready to do that?
What sets these apparatus apart is the unique situation around their creation and initial videoed performances. They were both exposed to an audience of millions and millions before they had to be a commercially viable act and before a second performing juggler could make one of their own. Despite the comparative ease of learning the skill, this initial period of fame and exclusive access to the apparatus was extended more than is typical for a new prop, due to the engineering required to construct it and the built-in logistical challenges to make it a commercially viable act. The lack of financial and logistical constraints has allowed for the creation of an even bigger juggling apparatus, the Gandini bounce cube. Most jugglers don't have Millennium Dome level of funding, nor a crane and a flatbed truck to move it, so it remains a Gandini exclusive. And yet the Gandini bounce cube wasn't featured on the PBS Great Performances TV show, with reruns for decades on national television. It didn't go viral as a video with millions of views on YouTube and other internet places, nor was it expanded into a full production and toured with a Cirque du Soleil show. So if somebody else makes a glass box to juggle in, would other jugglers point to the Gandini bounce cube and insist that because the Gandinis did it first, that Sean Gandini should have exclusive ownership rights? I'd suggest not. Mainly due to the fact that the Gandini cube hasn't been a commercial, critical, financial or public success at anywhere near the level of the triangle or cone before the second performer decided to make one. That's my analysis of why only two apparatus have cemented themselves in the minds of jugglers to be exclusive to the original creators. Why should people have to ask permission to make their own version? Why should they need licensing agreements? Why should they be ashamed to build their own version of the prop? No other new juggling props or apparatus are held to this same standard. Which brings me to the opinion part of this video. As you can tell, I consider it an accident of history that these two props have this ownership attached to them via outsized exposure to their first version combined with engineering and logistics issues that elongated that initial exclusivity. Because of that, I see no reason why other people shouldn't make their own versions of these juggling apparatus. For a start, the only way juggling grows as a performance art is by jugglers building on the work of those before, and doing so without worrying about being accused of stealing or copying. If copying props, tricks, or concepts really wasn't allowed in the juggling world, entire juggling conventions would be cancelled due to half of the acts being too similar to Stefan Zing, the other half too similar to Wes Peden, and nobody but Trespass would be allowed to perform Vertex Diabolo. Maybe some people are worried that, if enough people could try juggling in triangles and cones, knowledge of how easy it is to do would ruin the prestige, and familiarity would reduce how special it is in their minds. But I'm glad that, despite negative reactions from some parts of the juggling world, other people have improved on the original triangle and cone routines. Have you watched the original triangle routine lately? It really doesn't hold up. There's a whole section in the middle that's frankly quite boring. A whole minute goes by without a ball bouncing off anything but the base of the triangle. However, John Blanchard's triangle routine is still one of my favourite juggling pieces I've seen live, with a real sense of drama missing from Michael Moshen's original. And Greg Kennedy's conic video is a very cool technical demonstration, but it wasn't a finished juggling act. It was a preview. Greg is an engineer who only seems comfortable performing in black shiny pants and a black shirt, and he has done for his entire performance career. He very much needed outside help to make the act a polished final product, and thankfully the directors at Cirque du Soleil could step in and provide that. Once the sheer novelty of a new prop or technique wears off, new performances can bring in other elements, for example, music. What soundtrack did Greg use for his edited version of the Koenig video? Many people re-uploaded the original Koenig video with music attached, just to give it more energy. Rather than just using the sound of the bouncing balls, Regent St. Jules added structure and tension to his triangle act by using ever more dramatic music. Personally, I want there to be more people with access to triangles and cones, and I want to see what they come up with. Performing with two triangles side by side? Sure. Two jugglers passing balls using a triangle? Sure. That's a start. But I want to see new styles of performance with props and concepts, both new and old, with all kinds of different costumes, music, effects, staging, characters, choreography, stories, and more. How much are we missing due to the misplaced outrage about the cone and the triangle? If all new props and tricks are to be held so sacred, the juggling world is going to be stuck in the theatrically dull world of scowling white men in black pants and plain boring shirts, presenting an abstract series of patterns in dark, bare, empty studios with no music. The final argument I see against people making their own triangles and cones is worrying about the financial situations of Michael Moschen and Greg Kennedy. They created the apparatus. Shouldn't they be rewarded? Well, they have been. Greg Kennedy says in his TED Talk that because of Koenig,
I toured the world with Cirque du Soleil for 5 years.
That is his financial reward, and I'm sure he'll keep making money from performing with his cone for many years to come. He will be paid by audiences who see his show in the future. And Michael Moschen has already been paid too. The Foundation's website says the purpose of the MacArthur Fellows Program is to enable recipients to exercise their own creative instincts for the benefit of human society. In case you're wondering, the Genius Grant is $500,000. It has no strings attached, but if a juggler is given $500,000 to create new juggling props and new routines, and then creates a new prop and routine, why would the juggling world conclude that nobody should make their own version out of consideration of the finances of the guy who just received $500,000? The juggling community owes Michael Moschen and Greg Kennedy gratitude and credit, and plenty of both. But they are owed just as much money for being the first to make a shape to juggle in as any other juggler who comes up with a new prop, a new trick, or a new technique. And that is zero monies. Let's let these props go. To ensure correct credit, let's follow the example of the Sire Wheel and call them the Moschen Triangle and the Kennedy Cone. But let them exist in the world like any other new juggling prop. Innovations in juggling performance don't just come from new shapes to juggle with, or juggle in, or juggle on, as there are only so many shapes to go around. New things happen when people are free to expand on the work of others in the past, to create new theatrically interesting acts for new audiences. Let other people learn from it, to build upon it, and eventually create their own work. Actually, I'll let Greg Kennedy have the last word.
I want people to look at what I do, learn from it, build upon it, and eventually create their own work.